Hey guys, this is Shane at Bengal Public Library, and I want to thank you very much for joining me for Cooking with Shane. This is one of my favorite times of year. I love coming in and cooking with you guys and for you guys. I wish that you guys could be here because I love your questions and I love your reactions to the food. But unfortunately this year this is sort of the safest way that we can do this. So unfortunately you won't be able to test the food that I make. But you're going to see me make it here, and I'm going to put the recipes on our YouTube page, and I'll put it up on the children's website. So you can get the recipes there, and then you can try making them at home. I remember some of my best memories are cooking in the kitchen when I was a kid, so I'm hoping that you guys will take these recipes and kind of make them your own, or do whatever you want with them. But I want you to have fun when you're making them. So if you've done the Cooking with Shane program before in the summer reading program, you know that I try to kind of stick to the theme of whatever the summer reading program is. And this year's theme is Imagine Your Story. And it's pretty much pretty heavy on like the fairy tales and the folk tales. So the foods that I'm going to be making are going to be based on fairy tales. And there'll be fairy tales that you will probably know. We're going to do Hansel and Gretel, we'll have Rapunzel, and today we're going to do the Three Little Pigs. So what we're going to do is 3 little pigs in a blanket, and we're going to make a sweet hot mustard to go along with it. So very easy to make these. Basically all we're going to do is make a very quick biscuit recipe, and we're going to roll it out and put our little tiny pigs, our little hot dogs in there, and then we're going to bake them up. So we start with our biscuit mix. So it is 1 1/4 cups of flour, and when you're baking, you do want to make sure you have nice level scoops, because if you have too much or too little, then the reaction that you get while you're baking isn't really going to work the way you want it to. And that's one of the fun things about baking, is you learn things without actually learning that you're learning them. You learn a lot about science and math and a lot about patience. A lot of times when you're in the kitchen, things don't work out the way you want them to. Sometimes you don't have the stuff you need to make. Like today, I had to actually go out to the store to get eggs because I forgot to bring an egg in. These are just things that you deal with, but they're just they're always fun to make. So we've got our flour, and to this we are going to add our baking powder. We have 1 1/2 teaspoons. To that we are going to add 1 teaspoon of sugar. And it might sound strange to add sugar to like a savory item, but it just adds a little bit of sweet. You're not really going to taste the sugar, it's just going to be a little bit of sweet. So we're just going to give this a really quick mix. Make sure we get that baking powder distributed. If you have any lumps of flour, make sure you get those all kind of worked out. If you have a sifter, that would be the best thing to do. Just put the whole thing right through either a sifter or a mesh sieve. That would work too. Just kind of, when you go through, you'll see sometimes there's little chunks of the baking powder, because the baking powder will kind of clump up. Just make sure you get those kind of clumped out. You don't want to bite into a big clump of baking powder while you're eating your little pig in a blanket, because it's not the best taste in the world. It's really salty and just really bitter. Okay. So we've got this. So that's our dry ingredients, and what you'll notice too when you're baking, usually you mix your dry ingredients together and you mix your wet ingredients together, and then you sort of mix everything together. If you try to add your dry ingredients to your wet ingredients, a lot of times what will happen is they just sort of clump up, and you can't get a nice smooth batter or dough. So this is good. Now we've got, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little well in the middle. Just kind of pull some of the flour off to the side. And I'm going to add a half a cup of milk. And pour it right into the little hole that I made. And I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of melted butter. And then I'm just going to stir. So when you're making biscuits, you really don't want to mix it too much. This isn't a cake batter. You don't really want to get in here and really sort of mix it up. You just kind of want to lightly get it together until it basically just stays together. And then you just flour your surface. So if it's still a little wet at this point, it's all right, because you'd rather have it wet than dry. You can't really add more liquid to this, but you can always add a little bit more dry, so you can always add a little bit more flour. So we put this on to the side. And we have our flour dough. So this doesn't look like much of anything right now. We're just going to put a little bit of flour on top so our hands don't stick. And we're just going to kind of bring it together. So with a normal biscuit dough, this is basically where you would stop. You don't want to handle this too much. You don't want to mix it too much. You just want to get it to the thickness that you want, and then you make your biscuit. But we're making little wraps for our pigs in a blanket, so it needs to be a lot thinner. So we're actually going to roll this out. Get a little of that off your fingers. So we're going to roll this out. So you might find too that it's still a little too sticky. So just add a little bit of flour to your rolling pin. And you're going to roll this pretty thin. It's going to be a lot thinner than you'd think. You're going to roll it to about 1/4 of an inch thickness. So there we got a little bit of that coming in. If you notice any sort of wet pockets, just pour a little bit of flour on top. So you're going to see like something like that. That means it's a little bit too wet, so you just kind of put it down, grab a little bit of flour, pat it on there. So another way that this would sort of differ from a biscuit is you wouldn't want melted butter in your biscuit. You'd put in nice cold cubes of really cold butter or even frozen butter, because as it melts it kind of leaves those nice flaky pockets. But we melted it because we want sort of a thinner consistency, and we don't necessarily need that nice fluffiness that you're getting with the biscuit. So this is basically a biscuit that's just sort of rolled flat. And then once you get it to your thickness, you're just going to sort of cut down about 1 inch apart. You want a pretty sharp knife for this, so you'll want somebody to help you. So you can kind of take off some of you'll end up with like kind of weird little pieces. You can kind of cut those off, set them off to the side, because you may find that you don't have enough to cover all of your little cocktail beans. So you can kind of just take this dough and roll it out again. Alright, so now we've cut them into 1 inch strips the long way. Now we're going to go the other way and cut them into about 1 inch cubes. So what you end up with is a little tiny blanket that we're going to roll around our little piggies. So you're just going to take your first little blanket, flatten it a little bit more, and then we're going to take our, these are just the little tiny Smokies. I like to dry them off. Just make sure they're really dry, because if they're not dry, what'll happen is they're going to steam your biscuit from the inside, and it's really not going to cook your biscuit, and you're going to kind of end up with a mushy biscuit, and or a mushy blanket, and nobody likes a mushy blanket. So you just take your little hot dog and roll it and kind of pinch the edges together, and then you have your first pig in a blanket. So we're just going to go through, we're going to wrap all these, we're going to put them on a parchment sheet, and then we're going to put them in the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm not going to make you watch, because this is probably going to take me about 5 minutes, and it would be really boring for you to just sit here and watch me do this for 5 minutes. So I'm going to get all these wrapped up, and I will see you in just a minute. All right, we have wrapped all of our little pigs in our blankets. We are going to put them in a 400-degree oven for about 15 minutes. If you want to, you can put an egg wash or butter kind of glaze over the top to get a browner finish. But we're not going to do that today, because I don't think we're going to let them last very long. They're going to be eaten pretty quickly. So we're going to put these into our oven, 400 degrees, about 15 minutes. And while they cook, we are going to make the sweet hot mustard to go with them. Alright, so now we're going to make the sweet hot mustard that's going to go with our 3 little pigs in the blanket. I've taken some steps beforehand, just because the mustard, the dry mustard and the vinegar mixture needs to actually sit overnight. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take 4 ounces of just dry mustard, ground mustard, doesn't matter what kind, as long as it's a ground mustard, and 1 cup of distilled vinegar. You can probably get away with an apple cider vinegar, but you don't want a whole lot of flavor besides what's going in here. So what you do is you just pour your vinegar in, dump your mustard in, and give it a good whisk. So you want to whisk all the lumps out. And what you end up with is a really pretty runny mustard. The reason that we do this is because we want to pull out the full flavor of the mustard. So it's called blooming. So we're basically allowing all of that dried mustard to sort of soak up all that vinegar, and it's going to sort of open up, and it's going to just sort of give off all of its flavor. So you're going to get all the heat from it, and you're going to get all the flavor from it. And what you kind of end up with is actually, is for as wet as you put it into the refrigerator. So you just put a piece of plastic over it, put it in the fridge, and let it sit overnight. And what you end up with is this really thick paste. And that's basically because the ground mustard has soaked up all of the vinegar. So just kind of give this another quick whisk, just to get any lumps out. And we are going to make our sweet hot mustard. It's really simple to make, actually. It's 1 cup of mustard, so there's our heat. 1 egg. And our mustard vinegar mixture that we let set overnight. And that's it. So you'll notice that we're not adding any other liquids to this. We want this to be relatively thick, and what's going to happen is the vinegar that is in with the mustard is actually going to sort of be released by the mustard, and it's going to thin out a little bit. That's why we're kind of putting the egg in there to help thicken it back up. And the egg kind of gives it like a really creamy texture that you don't normally get with mustard. So we're just going to whisk this up, get all of the lumps out. Now we want to bring this up to about 145 for temperature. You don't want to let this get too hot, because you'll actually start to scramble the eggs. And if you do that, you're going to end up with sort of lumpy little scrambled eggs in here. And that's not really what we're going for. We're going for a nice, smooth mustard. But but we do want to make sure that we're cooking it enough to make sure that we're cooking the egg to a safe enough temperature. So you want to get somewhere between 145 and 165. If you have a little thermometer, that's the best thing to use. You just kind of stick it in there until it gets to 145. If you've got a digital one, that's even better because you just kind of like aim it at the surface and it'll tell you what it's getting to. But basically, when you start to see it bubble just a little bit, you don't want this to boil at all, because if you're boiling, you're well above your 165, and you've probably already got a whole bunch of just scrambled eggs with sweet hot mustard. So we're just going to let this go until we're up to the right temp. It's going to take a couple of minutes. And just kind of keep stirring until you get there. Okay, so you might not be able to see it, but you're starting to get a little bit of steam coming off the top. That means you know you're getting really close. You may start hearing it a little bit on the bottom. You might hear a little bit of bubbling on the bottom. And you notice that you're really smooth, and we've got a pretty good consistency right now. So at this point, we're going to take it off the stove. And we're going to let it cool down. So I'm going to put it into a jar and let it cool down. I'll probably put it in the fridge and just let it come to a fridge temp. And then it's set to use. So it's that easy to make. If you notice that you do scramble your eggs a little bit, it's all right. Just kind of run it through a mesh strainer and just kind of push the mustard through. It's really not that big of a deal. You can even leave it in there. It's not really that big of a deal. But if you want that nice smooth consistency, and you do notice that there's some lumps in there, just run it through a strainer and it'll be fine. So we're going to put that in a jar and put it in the fridge, and then we're going to be able to eat. So when they come out of the oven, you can kind of plate them up any way you want and just serve them with the sweet hot mustard and enjoy. So thank you guys for joining me. I hope you had fun. I hope you guys try this. You don't even necessarily need to do the little tiny cocktail hot dogs. You can actually just do this with a regular hot dog. Instead of, you just cut the long strip instead of cutting it into squares. Just cut the strip and roll it up. It'll be just as easy to do. But if you want to do it as kind of a fun appetizer, this is the way to do it. So again, I'll have this recipe on our YouTube page and up on the children's website, so you can find it there. And I think that's going to do it for today. I guess you can see that. That's what it all ends up looking like. You've got your nice mustard and your hot dogs. Or your pigs in a blanket, really. So join me next week. We're going to be doing Hansel and Gretel's gingerbread ice cream sandwiches. So we'll see you next week.